Welcome to Potter Nexus. What if magic could speak? What if every wand, every wall of Hogwarts, every cursed relic had a voice? And Harry Potter was the only one who could hear them. Before the story begins, like the video and subscribe to Potter Nexus, because some secrets were never meant to be heard. Chapter 1. The Whisper of the Cold Iron. The Dursley household wasn't just a prison. It was a sensory deprivation chamber designed to snuff out the spark of anything freakish. But for Harry Potter, the summer before his 5th year wasn't just quiet, it was screaming. It started with the alarm clock on his nightstand, a cracked plastic piece of junk that didn't just beep, it resented him. Harry lay flat on his back, staring at the peeling wallpaper of T.H. E.'s smallest bedroom in number 4 Privet Drive. The air was thick, stagnant, and tasted like suburban despair. Then, the sound hit him. It wasn't a voice in his ear, but a vibration in the marrow of his bones. Dust and gears, gears and dust. I tick for the master who hates the boy. I count the seconds until he bleeds. Rusty springs, tired hands. I want to stop. I want to shatter. Harry bolted upright, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He looked at the clock. It was 3:14 a.m. The digital display blinked with a sickly green light. He reached out, his fingers trembling, the moment his skin brushed the plastic casing, the voice surged into a roar of mechanical fatigue and programmed malice. "Shut up," Harry whispered, his voice rasping from days of disuse. He pulled his hand back, gasping. It wasn't just the clock. The floorboards under his feet groaned, not from weight, but with a deep, wooden memory of every heavy-footed step Vernon Dursley had ever taken. They felt bruised. The wardrobe in the corner was humming a low, dark tune about moths and cedar-scented loneliness. This wasn't madness. This was something else. The trauma of the graveyard, the return of Voldemort, the death of Cedric. It had cracked something inside Harry, and now the world was leaking in. He stood up, pacing the tiny room. Every object he passed flickered with a psychic signature. His school trunk in the corner was the loudest. It was a veteran of wars, smelling of parchment and ancient spells, and it was pissed off. "Open me, half-blood," the trunk echoed in his skull, the tone heavy and metallic. "I hold the weight of 1,000 secrets. Your robes are weeping, your books are screaming to be read. Why do we rot in the dark while the Dark Lord gathers his shadows? You are a king in rags. And we are your silent army." Harry gripped his head, sinking to his knees. "Get out of my head," he hissed. But the objects didn't care about his boundaries. The house was alive. Downstairs, the television was dreaming of static and propaganda. The kitchen knives were hungry. The very pipes in the walls were whispering about the filth they carried. He needed to get out. He needed the air that didn't vibrate with the misery of inanimate things. He grabbed his wand from under the loose floorboard. The second his palm closed around the holly wood, a bolt of pure, white-hot lightning surged up his arm. This wasn't the usual warmth. This was a conversation. "Brother," the wand sang, a high, piercing frequency that made Harry's vision blur. "Twin of the flame, seeker of the core. I remember the phoenix. I remember the brother. We are the bridge between the dead and the living. Why do you hesitate? The air is thick with the scent of snakes. The sky is bruising. We were made to burn, not to hide." Harry's eyes snapped open. The wand wasn't just a tool, it was a witness. It felt the proximity of the Dementors before they even turned the corner into Little Winged. It felt the cold, oily slick of the dark mark pulsating miles away. He threw on an oversized hoodie, his movements frantic. He had to move. He had to run until the voices faded. He crept down the stairs, the banister sneering at him as he touched it. Greasy palms, "Boy, you're nothing but a stain on this wood," and slipped out the front door into the suffocating heat of a Surrey night. Magnolia Crescent was a ghost town. The street lamps flickered with a dying buzz, complaining about the insects hitting their glass casings. Harry sprinted, his sneakers slapping the pavement, but the pavement spoke too. It told him about the cars that had passed, the dogs that had marked their territory, and the cold, inhuman weight of something approaching. He reached the playground. The swings were swaying in a wind that wasn't there. Creak, snap. "We wait for the heavy ones," the rusty chains sang. "We want to break. We want to drop them on the sand. Come sit, little hero. Let us feel the weight of your destiny. It's heavy enough to snap iron." Harry ignored the swings and slumped onto a bench. The wood of the bench was old, reclaimed from a forest that had seen blood. It whispered of axes and sap. "Is this it?" Harry asked the darkness. "Am I finally breaking?" "Broken is better," a new voice hissed. It wasn't an object. It was the air itself, turning cold. The temperature plummeted. The humid night air crystallized. The streetlights didn't just flicker, they died, their filaments screaming in a final, agonizing pop. Harry felt the familiar, soul-sucking dread. Dementors. He pulled out his wand. The Hollywood was screaming now. A war cry that vibrated through his teeth. Cast, cast. The void comes to eat the light. Unleash the stag, unleash the fire. Two shadows drifted over the fence, their tattered cloaks sucking the light out of the world. They didn't have thoughts, not like the objects. They were holes in reality. They were the absence of sound. Harry struggled to find a happy memory. The voices of the objects were drowning him out. The swings were mocking him, the pavement was cheering for his fall, and his own wand was demanding a power he wasn't sure he could summon. Think of the girl. The wand pulsed. Think of the red hair and the laughter in the common room. Think of the dog star. Think of the light, or we both die in the cold. Expecto. Expecto Patronum. A thin ribbon of silver leaked from his wand. It wasn't enough. The Dementors were closer now, their rattling breaths sounding like dry leaves on a grave. One of them lunged, its slimy, scabbed hand reaching for Harry's throat. Suddenly, Harry didn't just hear the wand. He felt the intent of the silver mist. The magic itself was an object, a sentient force born from his soul. Protect. The silver mist roared in his mind. We are the shield. We are the memory of love. Consume the darkness. The Patronus didn't just form, it exploded. A stag of blinding, supernova intensity erupted from the wand, its antlers glowing like white phosphorus. It didn't just charge, it hunted. The Dementors shrieked, a sound of tearing silk, and fled into the shadows of the alleyway. Harry stood there, gasping, his wand smoking in his hand. The stag turned to him, its eyes two pools of ancient, liquid silver. You hear us now. The stag's voice was Harry's own, but layered with the wisdom of 1,000 ancestors. The world is not silent, Harry Potter. It has never been silent. You have finally learned to listen. Now, prepare. The war is not coming, it is already under your skin. The Patronus vanished. The streetlights sputtered back to life, complaining about the sudden surge of electricity. Harry looked down at his wand. It felt heavier. It felt like a living thing, a partner, a weapon that knew him better than he knew himself. Fine, Harry whispered to the empty street. If everything wants to talk, I'll listen. But you're gonna tell me how to kill him. The wand didn't reply with words, but with a pulse of pure, predatory heat. Behind him, the sound of footsteps. Mundungus Fletcher had arrived, but Harry didn't need to see him. He could hear the silver flasks in the man's pockets whispering about stolen fire whiskey and the guilt of a coward. The game had changed. The boy who lived was no longer alone in his own head. He was the conductor of a symphony of steel, wood, and stone. And he was about to turn the volume up to 11. End of Chapter 1. Chapter 2. The Black Veil of Grimm Mauld. The arrival at number 12, Grimmauld Place wasn't a homecoming, it was an extraction. Harry sat in the back of the night bus, his head pressed against the vibrating glass of the window. The bus was a chaotic mess of sentient iron and desperate upholstery. Hold on tight, kid, I've got a loose lug nut and a grudge against the curb. The chassis groaned as they swerved violently through London. The streets are oily tonight. The asphalt tastes like rain and diesel. Watch out for the corners, I'm feeling twitchy. Harry squeezed his eyes shut. Every time the bus leapt 100 miles, the air inside shrieked. Not the wind, the actual air molecules, displaced and angry. When they finally skidded to a halt, in front of a row of dilapidated townhouses, Harry practically fell out of the doors. The noble and most ancient House of Black didn't just appear between numbers 11 and 13. It snarled into existence. The bricks ground against each other like rotting teeth, and the front door, heavy with black oak and silver, stared at Harry with a literal iron eye. Blood, the door hissed as he approached. I smell the mud in your veins. But there's a flicker of the old darkness too. Enter, half-blood. The shadows inside have been starving for a new soul to haunt. The moment Harry stepped over the threshold, the silence hit him like a physical blow, but it wasn't true silence. It was a suffocating layer of 1,000 muffled whispers. The house was a graveyard of memories, and every relic inside was a mourner. Keep your voice down, Harry, Moody growled behind him, his magical eye spinning wildly in its socket. Harry didn't need the warning. The heavy velvet curtains in the hallway were vibrating with a suppressed, high-pitched rage. Filth, scum, the boy with the scar walks the hallowed halls. If I had hands, I would strangle the breath from his lungs. The portrait, Harry muttered, recognizing the vitriol of Walburga Black. Not just the portrait, boy, his wand vibrated in his pocket. The fabric itself is soaked in her hate. The dust motes are her spies. Don't touch the doctor, apes, unless you want to feel a century of bigotry crawling under your fingernails. He walked deeper into the gloom. The house felt like it was breathing, its lungs the bellows of an ancient, soot-stained fireplace. He reached the kitchen, where a long wooden table sat under a low-hanging chandelier. The Order of the Phoenix was there, Weasleys, Lupin, Sirius, but Harry couldn't focus on their faces. He was looking at the forks. Tarnished silver, forgotten glory, the cutlery whispered as Mrs. Weasley set the table. We used to taste venison and vintage wine. Now we scrape against cheap tin and potato peels. The rebellion is a hungry, dusty thing. Harry. Sirius stood up, his face gaunt but his eyes burning with a desperate joy. He moved to hug his godson, and for a second, the voices went quiet. Sirius's leather jacket smelled of ozone and freedom, and it whispered of a man who refused to be broken. He's fraying, the jacket mourned. The threads are thin. He dreams of the sky, but he's trapped in the basement. Sirius, Harry said, his voice thick. He pulled away, trying to ignore the screaming gas lamps on the walls. The dinner was a blur of information he already knew. Voldemort was lying low. The Ministry was gaslighting the public, and Dumbledore was keeping Harry in the dark. But the objects in the room were telling a different story. A heavy, silver locket sat in a glass cabinet in the corner of the dining room. It didn't whisper. It pulsed. It was a heartbeat, slow and rhythmic, like a drum made of human bone. I am the secret. I am the peace that remains. Find me, and find the end of all things. Harry's fork clattered to his plate. He stared at the cabinet. The locket was radiating a cold, oily heat that made his scar prickle. You okay, Harry? Ron asked, his mouth full of mashed potatoes. That locket, Harry pointed, his finger trembling. Where did it come from? Sirius glanced over his shoulder. Just more of my mother's junk. We've been trying to clear out the dark artifacts. Most of them fight back. Why, it's breathing, Harry said. The room went dead silent. Molly Weasley stopped mid-pour with a pitcher of pumpkin juice. Remus Lupin leaned forward, his amber eyes narrowing. Objects don't breathe, Harry, Remus said gently, though his hand drifted toward his wand. This one does, Harry snapped, the frustration of the summer finally boiling over. The house is screaming, Remus. The curtains want to kill us, the floorboards are bruised, and that locket is humming a song about the end of the world. You want to tell me I'm crazy? Fine, but the clock in my room at the Dursleys told me it wanted to shatter because it hated Vernon, and 2 minutes later, Dementors showed up. I'm not imagining this. Hermione watched him, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and clinical fascination. Sentient resonance, she whispered. There are theories, Harry. Ancient magic suggests that high-intensity emotional trauma can fuse a wizard's subconscious to the molecular structure of his surroundings. But to hear them, that's god-tier legilimency applied to the inanimate. She's smart, but she's guessing, a heavy iron cauldron by the stove bubbled. You aren't just hearing us, Harry Potter. You're waking us up. Harry stood up, his chair screeching against the stone floor. Ow, watch the legs, kid. The chair yelped. I need to sleep, Harry said, his head throbbing. He climbed the stairs to the room he was sharing with Ron. The banister groaned under his hand, telling him about the house elves who had been beheaded in the name of purity. When he reached his bed, the mattress was complaining about the springs, but there was one thing that was quiet. His trunk. It sat at the foot of the bed, its brass locks gleaming in the dark. They're lying to you, the trunk whispered, its voice now familiar and grounding. Dumbledore isn't just protecting you, he's pruning you. He wants you to be a hero, but heroes are just tools with better marketing. You want the truth. The truth is hidden in the things people throw away. Harry lay down, staring at the ceiling. The shadows of the room began to dance. Harry, Ron whispered from the other bed. You really heard the locket? Yeah, Ron. It sounded like a drowning man. Harry fell into a feverish sleep. He dreamed of a long, dark corridor in the Ministry of Magic. He saw the door at the end. The one he had been seeing all summer. But this time, he didn't just see the door. He heard it. The door was weeping. I guard the unguardable, the door wailed in his dream. I hold the weight of the veil. Behind me is the silence that consumes the stars. Do not come here, child of prophecy. The dead are hungry, and they recognize your blood. Harry woke up drenched in sweat. The room was cold. At the foot of his bed, Creature the house elf was hunched over, clutching a pile of dirty rags. But Harry didn't see a miserable elf. He saw the rags. The rags were soaked in the tears of a boy named Regulus. They were crying out for a task that was never finished. They were screaming for the destruction of the locket. Creature, Harry said, his voice a low growl. The elf jumped, his bat-like ears twitching. The brat wakes. The half-blood master speaks to poor Creature in the dark. The locket, Harry said, sitting up. The one in the cabinet. It belonged to Regulus, didn't it? Creature froze. The rags in his hand let out a collective sob of memory. He knew. The master knew the darkness. He died to break the chain. How did you know? Creature whispered, his eyes bulging. The house told me, Harry said, his eyes glowing with a faint, eerie green light. And the house says you failed him. You were supposed to destroy it, weren't you? Creature fell to his knees, howling with a grief that shook the very foundations of the building. The walls groaned in sympathy. The floorboards wept. The heavy burden, the room whispered. The secret in the dark. The boy who hears the stones is the only one who can finish the job. Harry looked at his hands. He felt a power brewing, not the frantic, accidental magic of a child, but the cold, calculated resin. Ants of a man who could command the world around him. Get the locket, Creature, Harry commanded. We're going to find out what it's hiding. And if it won't talk to me, I'll make it scream. End of Chapter 2. Chapter 3. The Heartbeat in the Silver. The kitchen of Grimmauld Place felt like the inside of a ribcage. The shadows clung to the corners, and the stone floor breathed a damp, subterranean chill. Creature returned not with a walk, but with a desperate, shuffling crawl, his spindly fingers white-knuckled around the heavy gold locket. The object didn't just exist, it dominated the space. The air around it felt warped, like light passing through thick, oily water. Thump, thump, thump. It wasn't a sound. It was a pressure in Harry's sinuses. The locket was radiating a psychic frequency, so foul it made the nearby copper pots shiver and hiss. The master comes closer, the locket purred into Harry's mind, its voice a velvet sandpaper. The boy with the lightning scar. I can feel the piece of him that matches the piece of me. We are of the same cloth, stitched together by the needle of death. Harry reached out. Harry, don't, Ron yelled, catching Harry's wrist. Hermione was right behind him, her face pale in the flickering candlelight. That thing is dark. It's beyond dark. Look at it. It's like it's sucking the light out of the room. It is, Harry said, his voice sounding hollow, as if he were speaking from the bottom of a well. It's hungry, but it knows things. It knows him. Harry shook Ron's hand off. He took the locket from Creature. The moment the cold gold touched his palm, the world vanished. He wasn't in the kitchen anymore. He was standing in a cave, the air tasting of salt and ancient rot. He saw a basin filled with glowing green liquid. He saw a hand, pale, skeletal, and cruel, placing the locket into the depths. Hide it, the memory voice of Voldemort hissed, echoing through the gold. Let the water burn the soul. Let the shadows guard the fragment. I am immortal. I am the architect of the new world. Harry gasped, slamming back into reality. He was on his knees on the kitchen floor. The locket was burning his skin, but he didn't let go. You see, the locket mocked him. I am a king's ransom. I am the soul of a god. You are just a child playing with fire. Open me, little bird. Let me see the rod inside your own heart. I know you hate them, the Dursleys, the ministry. The old man who keeps you like a bird in a cage. Shut up, Harry groaned, clutching the locket tight. Harry, let it go. Hermione screamed. She reached for her wand, but the kitchen table suddenly lurched forward, blocking her path. Stay back. The table roared in Harry's mind, its heavy oak legs slamming against the stone. The conversation is private. The boy is listening to the deep truth. Harry looked at the table. He realized he wasn't just hearing the objects anymore, he was commanding them. His internal frequency was so high, so jagged with the resonance of the locket, that the house was reacting to his every emotion. Creature, Harry choked out. Tools, hammer, cleaver, anything. We have to open it. Master Regulus tried. Creature wailed, beating his head against the floor. The locket would not break. It laughed at the house elf. It bit the steel. It mocked the magic. I cannot be broken by common iron, the locket hummed. I am tied to the anchors of the world. Only the venom of the king or the fire of the stars can unmake me. Harry stood up, his eyes bright green, reflecting the malevolent light of the locket. He felt a strange, cold clarity. He looked at the kitchen sink, at the heavy iron pipes, at the very stove. "You think you're special," Harry hissed at the gold in his hand. "You're just a thing. You're metal and glass and a scrap of a coward's ego. This house is full of things that have been here for centuries. They've seen more than you. They've felt more than you." Harry turned to the room. "Help me," he whispered. The house responded. The silver spoons in the drawers began to rattle like a frantic heartbeat. The heavy iron chandelier above the table started to spin, its candles flaring into tall, violet flames. The floorboards began to groan in a rhythmic, chanting pulse. "Break the snake," the floorboards chanted. "Crush the glass. The House of Black remembers. The blood is tired. The soul is filthy." Harry placed the locket on the stone floor. He held his wand out, but he didn't point it at the locket. He pointed it at the room. "Lend me your weight," Harry commanded. The kitchen went into a frenzy. The heavy iron stove began to vibrate so hard it cracked the tiles beneath it. The shadows in the corner detached themselves from the walls, flowing toward the locket like liquid ink. Even the portraits in the hallway upstairs were screaming, their painted voices joining the cacophony. "We are the witnesses," the portraits cried. "We are the ancestors. Destroy the abomination." Harry felt a surge of power that wasn't his own. It was the collective rage of every object in the house, every chair that had been sat on by a tyrant, every knife that had cut a dark ritual, every brick that had hidden a lie. They were pouring their sentience into him. He slammed his wand down toward the locket. A bolt of raw, black and silver energy erupted, not from the wand's tip, but from the very air around him. The locket didn't just break. It screamed. A cloud of black smoke exploded from the gold, forming a giant, twisting serpent with the face of a younger Tom Riddle. It filled the kitchen, its eyes glowing with a hellish red light. "I have seen your heart," the smoke creature hissed, its voice vibrating through the pipes. "It is mine. You are the shadow I cast. You are the unwanted boy. You are the sacrifice." "No," Harry said, standing his ground as the kitchen table shattered into splinters to form a barrier around him. "We stand with the boy," the wood shrieked. The smoke riddle turned its gaze on Ron and Hermione, who were huddled in the corner. "The girl who doesn't belong. The boy who is always second best. I will eat your futures and leave you as empty as this house." "Harry, do it," Ron yelled, his voice cracking. "Kill it." Harry didn't use a spell. He used the house. "Everything," Harry roared. Now, the kitchen exploded. The iron pipes burst, spraying boiling water that turned to steam midair. The knives flew from the drawers like a silver storm. The very stones of the floor rose up like teeth. They converged on the smoke serpent, tearing into it, shredding the darkness with the sheer weight of physical reality. "Get out," the house screamed through Harry's mouth. "Get out of our walls. Get out of our boy." With a final, ear-piercing shriek that shattered every window in the kitchen. The smoke serpent dissipated. The locket lay on the floor, its gold casing twisted and melted, the green glass eye cracked and dull. Silence fell, but it wasn't the old silence. It was a new, exhausted quiet. The objects in the room went still. The stove stopped vibrating. The knives fell to the floor with a series of dull clangs. Harry collapsed, his lungs burning. He looked at the locket. It was dead. Its voice was gone. "Thank you," a tiny, fading whisper came from the floorboards. "The air is cleaner now." Creature crawled toward the remains of the locket, his eyes streaming with tears. He picked up the twisted metal and pressed it to his forehead. "Master Regulus, the debt is paid. The half-blood master has broken the dark thing." Harry looked at his hands. They were shaking. He could still hear the house, but it was different now. It didn't sound like a collection of angry secrets. It sounded like a wounded animal trying to heal. "Harry," Hermione whispered, stepping over the debris. She looked at the destroyed kitchen, then at him. What was that?" "That wasn't just magic. You were talking to the house. You were leading it." "I'm not just hearing them, Hermione," Harry said, looking up at her. His eyes were still tinged with that strange, emerald fire. "I'm waking them up, and now that they're awake, they aren't going to let anyone hurt me again." Above them, the house groaned, a deep, satisfied sound of a predator settling into a nap. "Rest, little master," the stairs whispered as Harry began to climb back to his room. "We will guard the doors. We will watch the shadows. The war is loud, but we are louder." Harry reached his bed and fell onto it without taking off his shoes. As he drifted into a dreamless sleep, his wand, resting on the nightstand, let out a soft, warm hum. Sleep, brother. Tomorrow, we learn to hunt. End of Chapter 3. Chapter 4. The Armory of the Brave. The Hogwarts Express didn't just roll into platform 9 3/4. It screamed like a titan being dragged back to the salt mines. As Harry stepped onto the platform, the sheer volume of the world nearly brought him to his knees. Hundreds of trunks, cages, and aldrons were all shouting at once, a cacophony of adolescent anxiety and mechanical fatigue. Not another year of grease and soot. A nearby cauldron wailed, "I've got a hairline fracture in my base. All leak, all ruin the floor, stuffy, it's too stuffy in here." A snowy owl's cage chirped. Harry pressed his hands over his ears, his teeth grinding. The air in London was thick with the smog of progress and the psychic residue of thousands of muggles who had no idea they were walking past a gateway to another world. "Harry, mate, you look like you've gone 10 rounds with a mountain troll," Ron said, lugging his own trunk. "The noise, Ron," Harry grunted. "It's getting louder. The boy hears us," the train hissed, a massive, steam-driven lung exhaling a cloud of white vapor. "The engine of the West. I've carried the legends. I've carried the failures. This one tastes like lightning and ozone. Welcome back, little spark. I've oiled my pistons just for you." Harry climbed aboard, the floorboards of the train vibrating with a rhythmic pulse that matched his own heartbeat. He found a compartment at the back, sliding the door shut. The wood of the door let out a satisfied snick. "Locked," the latch whispered. "I'll hold. No one gets in unless you say so." As the train lurched forward, Harry felt the shift. They were leaving the mundane world behind, entering the slipstream of magic. But the atmosphere on the train was different this year. It wasn't the usual buzz of summer stories, it was a heavy, damp blanket of suspicion. The newspapers on the seats were screaming headlines about "the boy who lies." And the ink on the pages felt like poison. Lies, filth, were printed with bile. The copies of the Daily Prophet hissed as students tossed them aside. "Fudge pays for the ink, so we print the rot. Don't read us, we'll stain your soul." Halfway through the journey, the compartment door slid open. It wasn't a friend. Neville Longbottom stood there, looking shaken, followed by Luna Lovegood, whose eyes were fixed not on Harry's face, but on his wand. "The air around your wand is humming, Harry Potter," Luna said, her voice like a dream. "It sounds like a choir of bees who have forgotten the way back to the hive." She hears the frequency. The holly wand pulsed against Harry's leg. "The girl with the silver eyes. She's tuned to the static. Watch her." "Sit down, Luna," Harry said, his voice low. Neville sat, clutching his Mimbulus Mimbletonia. The plant wasn't an object, but it had a consciousness that Harry could feel, a weird, pulsating rhythm of defensive sludge. Suddenly, the temperature in the carriage dropped. The light from the windows dimmed, and the train began to slow down. Not a scheduled stop. Cold, so cold, the window panes shivered. Frost blooming across the glass in jagged, crystalline patterns. "The glass is freezing. It's going to crack. Help us." "Not again," Ron whispered, reaching for his wand. But it wasn't Dementors. The door to the compartment was pulled open with a violent, magical force. Draco Malfoy stood there, flanked by Crabbe and Goyle. But Draco looked different. There was a desperate, sharp edge to his thoughts that Harry could almost taste. Harry didn't look at Draco. He looked at the ring on Draco's finger, a silver signet with the Malfoy crest. "Master is afraid," the ring whispered, its voice thin and aristocratic. "The Dark Lord touched the father, and the son feels the cold. I am heavy with the weight of a task too big for a boy. I am a shackle disguised as jewelry." "Potter," Draco sneered, though his hand was shaking. "Enjoying the ride? It's the last one you'll take where you're the hero. The Ministry is going to dismantle you brick by brick." Harry stood up slowly. He didn't pull his wand. He didn't need to. He placed his hand on the wall of the train carriage. "You're terrified, Draco," Harry said. "The ring on your finger is telling me how much your hand is sweating. It's telephone. Ling me you haven't slept because the shadows in your manor are starting to talk back." Draco's face went bloodless. "What are you talking about?" "Tell him." The train's steel frame groaned, a sound like a distant thunderclap. Harry leaned in, his eyes glowing with that predatory green fire. "The things you own, they don't like you. They see the coward underneath the silk. Your wand, it's waiting for a stronger hand to take it. It's bored of your petty spite." "True," Draco's wand hissed from his pocket, a faint sound only Harry could hear. "I am hawthorn and unicorn hair, but I am held by a ghost. I want to feel the lightning." Get out, Harry commanded. He didn't use a spell. He just willed the door to close. The heavy sliding door slammed shut with such force that the glass rattled, nearly clipping Malfoy's nose. The lock clicked into place with a definitive, metallic thud. Get gone, little snake, the door growled. The rest of the trip was spent in a tense silence, save for Lou. Na humming a tune that matched the vibration of the engine. When they finally reached Hogsmeade Station, the carriages were waiting. The Thestrals stood in the gloom, skeletal and silent. To everyone else, they were invisible or terrifying. To Harry, they were the only things in the world that felt quiet. They didn't have the frantic chatter of objects. They were beings of the veil, and they radiated a deep, mourning peace. Brother in grief, the lead Thestral's leather wings rustled. You carry the echo of the dead. We carry the living to the stone heart. Step up. As they pulled up to the castle, Hogwarts loomed over them like a god made of granite. For the first time, Harry felt the true scale of his power. The castle wasn't just a building. It was a consciousness. 1,000 years of spells, blood, laughter, and death had soaked into every stone, every gargoyle, and every hidden passage. He is here. The great hall's massive oak doors boomed as the students approached. The sound was so loud in Harry's head he nearly stumbled. The air of the lightning. The one who listens. Open the gates. Awaken the ancients. Harry walked through the doors, and the world exploded in a symphony of history. The floating candles were singing about the wax of centuries. The house banners were whispering about the bravery and the betrayal of the students who had gone before. But over the noise, at the high table, Harry saw a new figure. A woman in sickeningly bright pink. Dolores Umbridge. She sat there like a toad, her quill, a sharp, feathered thing on the table, twitching with a malicious, ink-stained hunger. I want to scratch, the quill whispered, its voice a jagged needle in Harry's brain. I want to tear the skin. I want to write the lies in red. Give me a hand to break. Give me a soul to bleed. Harry gripped the edge of the Gryffindor table. The wood under his hands felt warm and sturdy, but it was bracing itself. The pink one is a cancer, the table groaned. She brings the silence of the ministry. She wants to mute the stone. She wants to cage the magic. Do not let her, lion. If she silences us, the castle dies. Dumbledore stood up to speak, but for the first time, Harry didn't listen to the headmaster's words. He listened to the podium. The golden owl on the lectern was vibrating with a hidden frequency. The old man is hiding behind his beard, the owl hissed. He knows the dark is coming. But he thinks he can play the long game. He's forgotten that the shortest distance between 2 points is a strike to the heart. Harry looked at Dumbledore. The headmaster's eyes met his. And for a split second, the old man's half-moon spectacles flashed with a warning. Don't show them what you can do, the spectacles whispered, a direct transmission of Dumbledore's intent. The walls have ears, Harry. And now, so do you. Harry looked away, his gaze falling on Umbridge. She was smiling, a thin, cruel line. I'm not going to be quiet, Harry whispered to the table. Then we will provide the thunder. The great hall replied, the very foundations of the castle shifting in a deep, subterranean growl that made the water in the goblets ripple. The war for Hogwarts had begun, and the stones were choosing their side. End of Chapter 4. Chapter 5. The Penance of Red Ink. The first week of classes at Hogwarts felt like walking through a minefield of static. Every corridor Harry traversed was a battlefield of conflicting histories. The suits of armor didn't just stand there, they bragged about the heads they'd cracked in 1412. The tapestries didn't just hang, Hay gossiped about the secret trysts and stabbings they'd witnessed in the dark. But nothing was as loud or as foul as defense against the dark arts. The classroom had been scrubbed of its soul. The pickled dark creatures were gone, replaced by lace doilies and moving pictures of kittens that purred with a mechanical, nauseating sweetness. At the front of the room sat Dolores Umbridge, her pink cardigan a-scream against the gray stone. I am the law, the velvet cushion beneath her whispered, its fabric tight with arrogance. I support the weight of the ministry. I am soft, but I am unyielding. Sit, children, be silent, be broken. Harry sat at his desk, his hands clenched. The wooden desk beneath him was terrified. It had felt the scratch of 1,000 nervous quills, but it had never felt a coldness like the woman in pink. Good afternoon, class, Umbridge said, her voice like a spoonful of honey laced with arsenic. Good afternoon, Professor Umbridge, the class droned back, except for Harry. She's a void, Harry's wand hummed in his pocket. She has no magic of her own, only the stolen authority of the state. She's a parasite of the system. Burn her, brother. Burn the lace. The lesson was a farce. Reading from a textbook that treated magic like a dangerous hygiene issue. When Harry challenged her, when he spoke the name of Cedric Diggory and the return of the Dark Lord, the air in the room didn't just chill. It solidified. Mr. Potter, Umbridge said, her smile never reaching her bulging eyes. Detention. My office. 5 o'clock. The office smelled of dried flowers and cruelty. The walls were covered in plates of frolicking cats. As Harry entered, the plates began to chatter. Look at the boy, the liar, the troublemaker. The porcelain cats hissed, their painted fur bristling. Suffer for the mistress, bleed for the queen. You will be doing some lines for me today, Mr. Potter, Umbridge said, gesturing to a small parchment. No, not with your quill. You will use a special one of mine. She handed him a long, thin black quill with an unusually sharp point. The moment Harry's fingers touched the wood, a jolt of pure, jagged agony shot through his arm. This wasn't just an object. It was a torture device. I am the black quill, the object shrieked in his mind, its voice a jagged razor dragging across silk. I do not use ink. I use the essence. I use the truth that stays in the marrow. Write, little hero, let me drink. What am I to write? Harry asked, his voice steady despite the vibration of the quill. I must not tell lies, Umbridge whispered. Harry pressed the nib to the parchment. Scrape, tear, sip. As he wrote the first letter, a searing pain erupted on the back of his left hand. The words appeared on the paper in a dark, glistening crimson. Simultaneously, the skin on his hand was sliced open as if by an invisible blade, carving the same words into his flesh. Sweet, so sweet, the parchment moaned. The blood of the prophecy. It tastes of lightning and old sorrow. Quote, Harry didn't flinch, he didn't gasp, he watched the blood well up, then sink back into the skin as the wound partially healed, leaving a raw, red mark. More, the quill demanded, vibrating with a sadistic hunger. I want to see the bone. I want to etch the soul. Harry looked at Umbridge. She was watching him with a predatory hunger, her tongue darting out to lick her lips. She wanted his pain. She wanted his submission. But Harry wasn't just feeling the pain. He was feeling the quill's history. He saw the ministry workshops where these were forged in secret. He saw the screams of other, subversives, who had been broken by this very piece of wood. You think you own me? Harry projected his thought directly into the quill. You think you can eat my blood and keep your shape? I've heard the voices of Horcruxes. I've spoken to the heart of the castle. You are nothing but a splinter of a dying tree. The quill froze in his hand. What are you? I am the one who wakes the world. Harry thought, a surge of raw, green-tinted energy flowing from his fingers into the black wood. The quill began to smoke. Is something wrong, Mr. Potter? Umbridge asked, leaning forward. Just the truth coming out, Professor, Harry said, his voice dropping into a low, gravelly register. Harry began to write faster. But he wasn't writing. I must not tell lies. Under the influence of his will, the quill was forced to change its tune. On the parchment, the words began to shift. The blood didn't form Umbridge's sentence. It began to draw a map of the ministry's crimes. A map of the fear lurking in Umbridge's own heart. No, stop, the quill screamed, trying to snap itself in his hand. I cannot reveal. I am bound to secrecy. You are bound to me now, Harry countered. The office began to react. The porcelain plates on the wall started to crack. The cats didn't hiss anymore, they began to howl in genuine terror. The lace doilies curled and blackened at the edges. Mr. Potter, what are you doing? Umbridge shrieked, standing up. Harry didn't look up, he was focused on the back of his hand. The words were carving themselves deeper, but the pain was being redirected. Every time the quill bit into Harry's skin, a mirror image of the wound flickered onto Umbridge's own hand. She let out a sharp cry, clutching her left hand. A thin line of red appeared on her pale, pudgy skin. You're using dark magic. She gasped, her face turning a mottled purple. I'm just doing my lines, Professor, Harry said, finally looking up. His eyes were glowing with a terrifying, incandescent green. The quill is just very expressive. The room was now a cacophony of breaking glass and screaming furniture. The desk was trying to buck Umbridge off. The heavy curtains were twisting like snakes, trying to bar the door. Freedom, the quill suddenly yelled, a psychic blast that shattered the inkwell on the desk. The black wood of the quill splintered. It didn't just break, it disintegrated into a fine, black dust that swirled around Harry like a protective shroud. Harry stood up. The back of his hand was scarred, the words "I must not tell lies" etched in a faint silvery white, but Umbridge was shaking, her hand bleeding onto her pink carpet. "This session is over," Harry said. He walked to the door. The handle, usually stubborn and cold, turned with a joyful click. "Well done, Lion," the door whispered. "She'll dream of red ink tonight." Harry stepped out into the hallway. The castle felt different now. The stones were humming a low, vibrating chord of victory. He looked down at the scar on his hand. It wasn't a mark of shame, it was a brand of the war he was finally starting to fight on his own terms. He wasn't going to just wait for Voldemort. He was going to dismantle the world that allowed men like Voldemort and women like Umbridge to exist. "Where to, brother?" his wand asked, its tip sparking with anticipation. "To the room," Harry said. "The one that provides what you need. It's time we built an army that doesn't just use wands, but speaks with the voice of the earth itself." As he walked, the portraits bowed. The armor clattered in salute. The boy who listened was becoming the man who commanded. End of Chapter 5. Chapter 6. The Architecture of Rebellion. The 7th floor corridor was silent, but Harry could hear the wall breathing. It wasn't just stone and mortar, it was a rhythmic, shifting pulse of infinite possibility. He paced 3 times in front of the blank stretch of masonry, his mind a focused laser of intent. "I need a place to fight. I need a place to wake the steel. I need a place where the walls won't gossip." The bricks groaned, a deep, tectonic sound like a giant stretching its limbs. A door materialized, heavy iron, reinforced with rivets that whispered of ancient forges. "I am the room of requirement," the door hummed as Harry gripped the handle. "I am the echo of your hunger. Step inside, seeker. I have gathered the forgotten things. I have built you a cathedral of war." Harry stepped in. The room was massive, a sprawling industrial cavern filled with training dummies, stacks of ancient books. And, most importantly, racks of rusted, discarded weapons from 1,000 years of Hogwarts history. "Pick us up," a shattered claymore in the corner wheezed. "We've been in the dark for 3 centuries. We want to feel the heat of a spell again. We want to taste the air." Ron, Hermione, and the 30-odd students of the DA filed in behind him. They looked around in awe, but Harry was looking at the dummies. They weren't just straw and wood. Under his gaze, they flickered with a dull, gray consciousness. "Listen up," Harry said, his voice echoing off the high stone ceiling. He didn't need a sonorous. The room itself amplified his frequency, making his words vibrate in the students' chests. "The Ministry thinks magic is a theory. Umbridge thinks we're children, but the world around you is alive, and it's tired of being ignored." "Harry," Neville whispered, staring at a rack of shields. "The shields, they're vibrating." "We're ready, little Longbottom," the shields buzzed in a metallic unison. "Your grandfather held us at the Battle of the Black Moors. We remember the courage in the marrow. Stand tall. Everything has a story," Harry told the group. "And everything has a breaking point. Today, we don't just learn to cast. We learn to listen." He walked to the center of the room. "Hermione, stupefy the dummy on the left." Hermione stepped forward, her wand snapping out. "Stupefy." The red light hit the wooden target. It wobbled, but that was it. "You're fighting the wood," Harry said, shaking his head. "You're treating it like a wall. Don't. Hear the grain. Hear the way the sap dried 100 years ago. It's brittle on the left side, soft in the center." Harry closed his eyes. He felt the dummy. It felt stubborn. It felt like it was bored of being hit. "I'm just a post," the dummy complained. "Hit me. Don't hit me, I'm still just wood. Why should I fall?" "Because I'm asking you to fly," Harry thought. He didn't pull his wand. He just snapped his fingers. The dummy didn't just fall. It exploded into 1,000 splinters that swirled in the air like a localized tornado before reassembling itself into the shape of a wolf. The class gasped. The wood wolf let out a silent, splintered howl. "Magic isn't something you do to the world," Harry said, his eyes burning. "It's a conversation. If you're loud enough, the world obeys." For the next 4 hours, the room of requirement became a symphony of sentient chaos. Under Harry's guidance, Neville learned to talk to the stone floor, making it ripple like water to trip his imaginary opponents. Ginny found she could command the air in the room, making it thick and heavy like molasses to slow down incoming hexes. But the real breakthrough came when Harry approached the weapons rack. He CKED up a shield that was dented and scorched. "I failed my last master," the shield moaned. "The killing curse is too fast. It burns the soul." I'm just iron. I can't stop the green light. You can if you aren't alone, Harry whispered. He held the shield high. Everyone, focus on the iron. Give it your intent. Don't just cast a shield charm in front of you. Put the charm into the metal. The DA circled around. 30 wands pointed at the rusted shield. Now, Harry roared. A torrent of silver and blue light poured into the iron. The shield began to glow, the dents smoothing out, the rust flaking away to reveal a surface as bright as a fallen star. I am more, the shield sang, its voice now a deafening, angelic roar of clashing cymbals. I am the Aegis. I am the wall that does not break. Bring me the dark. Bring me the snake. I am hungry for the impact. Harry felt the power of the room peaking. The walls were pulsing red and gold. The gargoyles on the ceiling were shifting, their stone eyes following the students with predatory pride. But then, the frequency changed. A sharp, rhythmic scratching sound began to echo from the other side of the room's main door. It was the sound of a quill, the black quill, screaming from across the castle. She is coming, the door shrieked. The pink one, she has the squad, she has the hammers, everyone out. Through the back way, Harry commanded. As the students scrambled toward the vanishing cabinet the room provided, Harry stayed behind for a moment. He looked at the room, the wolf dummy, the glowing shield, the vibrating floor. They're going to try to break you, Harry said to the walls. Let them try, the room of requirement replied, its voice 1,000 whispers of every student who had ever needed a home. We are Hogwarts. We are the stone that remembers. We will hide the heart until you are ready to strike. Harry slipped out just as the first crack appeared in the masonry of the hallway. He didn't run. He walked slowly, his wand humming a low, dark tune of war. Umbridge was standing in the corridor, her face contorted with a manic, desperate glee, her inquisitorial squad behind her. She looked at the blank wall, then at Harry. Where are they, Mr. Potter? She hissed, her hand twitching toward her pocket. Harry looked at her, and then he looked at the stones of the wall behind her. He could hear them laughing. There's nothing here, Professor, Harry said, a cold smile playing on his lips. Just a lot of old stories. But if I were you, I'd watch your step. The castle is starting to lose its patience. As he walked past her, the floor beneath Umbridge's feet gave a tiny, malicious shudder. Just enough to make her stumble. Just enough to let her know that the world she thought she controlled was starting to wake up. Next time, we trip her into the dungeons, the floorboards whispered. Harry didn't look back. He had an army, and for the first time in his life, the tools were on his side. End of Chapter 6. Chapter 7. The Reckoning of the Ancestral Blade. The atmosphere in the castle had curdled. It was no longer just a school, it was an occupied territory. Umbridge's educational decrees, being nailed to the stone walls by Filch, the hammer blows sounding like coffin nails. Each time a new frame was mounted, the wall beneath it shrieked in agony. They are piercing my skin. The corridor masonry wailed, cold iron and heavy frames. They are trying to cage the truth behind glass. Rip them down, lion. Tearing them off would feel like a cool breeze. Harry walked through the halls, his eyes hooded. He could feel the eyes of the inquisitorial squad on his back, and he could hear the heavy, brass badges on their chests gloating. We are the mark of the snitch, the badges preened. We see the movements. We report the whispers. We are the shiny eyes of the toad. Let them watch, Harry muttered. He was headed for the headmaster's office. Dumbledore had been distant, a ghost in his own castle. But the objects in the room had been calling to Harry for weeks. They were screaming about a silver instrument that had begun to leak a dark, smoky residue. Harry reached the gargoyle guarding the stairs. It didn't wait for a password. It sensed the vibration of Harry's wand and the raw, kinetic authority rolling off him. The listener comes, the gargoyle ground out, its stone jaw creaking. Enter, Potter. The old man is drowning in his gadgets. The stairs spiraled upward. When Harry entered the office, the noise was deafening. Thousands of tiny silver instruments were clicking, whirring, and puffing smoke. Each one a different frequency of anxiety. He's late. The prophecy is shifting. One spindly clock ticked. The dark is at the door. The boy is the key. The key is breaking. Another chimed. Dumbledore sat behind his desk, looking older than Harry had ever seen him. His hands were tucked into his sleeves, but Harry could hear the rings on his fingers, they were cold. Mourning the loss of a power they couldn't protect. Harry, Dumbledore said, his voice a weary rasp. You have been very active. The castle is restless. I can feel the stones shifting under your feet. The stones are tired of being lied to, Professor, Harry said, walking to the center of the room. He didn't look at the headmaster. He looked at the sorting hat, perched on its shelf. The hat was vibrating. It wasn't singing. It was snarling. Gryffindor, Slytherin, Ravenclaw, Hufflepuff. The seams are tearing. The hat's voice boomed in Harry's skull. I was sewn from the scraps of founders. But I am filled with the blood of 1,000 years. I see the rot. I see the crown of the serpent. The hat has something for me, Harry said. Dumbledore's eyes sharpened. The hat provides for Gryffindors in need, Harry. But you must be careful what you ask for. Some gifts have a weight that can crush the soul. I am not a gift. I am a judgment. A voice roared from inside the hat. Suddenly, the hat convulsed. Something long, silver, and ancient began to slide out of its brim. The sound was like a choir of swords being drawn in a cathedral. The sword of Gryffindor hit the floor with a heavy, resonant clang that silenced every instrument in the room. The silver was inlaid with rubies the size of pigeon eggs, and the blade hummed with a frequency so high it made Harry's teeth ache. Harry reached down and gripped the hilt. The world turned red. Godric. The sword screamed, a warrior's cry that shook the very foundations of Hogwarts. I have tasted the venom. I have drunk the basilisk. I am the end of lies. Use me to carve the path. Use me to reap the shadows. The sword wasn't just a weapon. It was a memory of every battle ever fought for the light. It felt the proximity of the Horcruxes, it remembered the locket Harry had destroyed, and it was thirsty for the rest. Harry, put it down, Dumbledore commanded, standing up. The air in the office began to hum with his own immense power. No, Harry said, his voice sounding like two stones grinding together. The sword is tired of sitting in a hat while the world burns. It says you're waiting for a moment that will never come. It says the time to strike isn't when the enemy is ready, but when the steel is hot. The old man is a shepherd who has lost his flock. The sword vibrated in Harry's hand. He watches the stars while the wolves are in the fold. Strike, Potter, strike the air, cut the veil. Harry swung the sword in a wide arc. He didn't hit anything physical, but the blade sliced through the magical wards of the office like they were wet parchment. The silver instruments shattered. The portraits of previous headmasters shrieked and dove out of their frames. Freedom. The shattered glass cheered. Harry, enough. Dumbledore's wand was out, the Elder Wand. The moment the two legendary items were in the same space, the room began to tear apart. The Elder Wand didn't speak like the others. It was a cold, silent void. It didn't have thoughts, it had a singular, terrifying hunger. Death, the holly wand in Harry's pocket whispered, shrinking away in fear. That is the Master of Graves. It does not speak to the living. It only speaks to the end. Harry felt the clash of frequencies. The sword of Gryffindor, life, courage, and blood, against the Elder Wand, death, inevitability, and the void. You're hiding things again, Harry said, his eyes glowing with a feral green light. The sword tells me there's another one. Not the locket, not the diary, something closer, something in this very school. Dumbledore's face went pale. Harry, you are seeing things you were never meant to see. The resonance is overwhelming your mind. No, Harry said, stepping toward the door. I'm finally seeing everything. The objects don't lie, Professor. People do. Walls do. But the steel remembers. Harry walked out, the sword of Gryffindor trailing at his side, its tip sparking against the stone floor. Scree, scree, I am hungry. Led me to the cup. Led me to the diadem. Led me to the snake. As he descended the stairs, the gargoyle bowed so low its forehead touched the floor. The king of scraps walks, the gargoyle whispered. Harry didn't go to the common room. He went to the room of requirement. He had the weapon now. He had the voice. Now, he just needed to find the hidden heart of the castle and rip it out before Voldemort could use it to bleed them dry. The sword sang a low, bloody lullaby as Harry disappeared into the shadows of the 7th floor. The war was no longer about spells and counter-spells. It was about the soul of the world, and Harry Potter was the only one who could hear it screaming. End of Chapter 7. Chapter 8. The Requiem of the Lost Diadem. The sword of Gryffindor wasn't just a blade anymore. It was a dowsing rod for the damned. As Harry moved through the corridors, the silver hilt pulsed against his palm like a frantic, metallic heart. It was hunting. It was snarling at the very air, its edge vibrating with a frequency that made the nearby paintings clutch their ears and flee into their neighbors' frames. Stale air, old secrets. The sword roared in Harry's mind. I smell the rot. I smell the raven's pride turned to dust. It is near, Potter. The piece of the dark one that mocks the wise. Harry pushed past a group of frightened first years. He didn't see them. He only saw the world as a map of vibrating energies. He was headed for the one place where the castle's memory was most cluttered, the room of hidden things. He stood before the blank wall on the 7th floor. He didn't pace this time. He slammed the pommel of the sword against the masonry. Open, Harry commanded. Show me the graveyard of vanities. The wall didn't just slide, it buckled inward. The stones groaning in submission. As you wish, breaker of locks, the wall whispered. The door swung wide, revealing a cathedral of junk. Towers of broken furniture, mountains of forbidden books, and thousands of discarded artifacts rose into the gloom like the ruins of a forgotten civilization. The air was thick with the scent of stagnant magic and the whispers of a million forgotten students. Pick me up, I still have one charge left. A cracked wand wailed from a pile. I remember the girl who cried over me. A stained handkerchief sobbed. Dust, only dust, we are the ghosts of the physical. The collective heap moaned. Harry stepped into the labyrinth. The sword of Gryffindor began to glow with a fierce, crimson light, the rubies burning like embers. That way, beyond the mountain of chairs, the cold spot, the void in the web, Harry climbed a precarious stack of desks. At the summit, perched atop a blistered bust of an old warlock, sat a tarnished silver tiara. It looked unremarkable, except for the way the air around it seemed to curve, as if the space itself were trying to pull away from it. Wit beyond measure is man's greatest treasure, the diadem whispered, its voice a haunting, melodic chime that vibrated in Harry's teeth. Why do you bring such violence to a place of thought, Harry Potter? Put the steel down, put it down and let me show you the secrets of the stars. I can give you the answers Dumbledore hides. I can make you the master of the logic that governs the gods. Harry froze. The diadem wasn't screaming like the locket. It was reasoning. It was the intellectual seductive power of Rowena Ravenclaw, twisted by the parasitic ego of Tom Riddle. Do not listen. The sword shrieked, its vibration turning into a searing heat. It is a trap of the mind. It will hollow you out and fill you with silence. You're Rowena's pride, Harry said, his voice echoing in the vast cavern of junk. But you've been stained. You're a cage for a piece of a monster. Stained? No, the diadem purred. I am enhanced. I am the wisdom of the ages paired with the ambition of the eternal. Imagine, Harry, you could see the strings of the universe. You could hear not just the objects, but the very atoms of the world. You could rebuild the castle in your image. Harry reached for it, his hand trembled. The power it promised was the ultimate version of his own gift. To hear everything, to know everything. Harry, the voice wasn't an object. It was Hermione. She and Ron had followed him, bursting through the door, their wands lit. Harry, don't touch it, Hermione yelled. It's generating a high-frequency cognitive feedback loop. It's trying to rewrite your neural pathways. The girl is a nuisance, the diadem hissed, the silver turning a dark, bruised purple. She is a slave to books. You are a king of reality. Kill the distractions, Harry. Kill them and we shall rule the silence. Harry's eyes flared green. He looked at Ron and Hermione, and for a second, they didn't look like friends. They looked like jagged, vibrating shapes of meat and bone that were too loud, too messy, too human. Yes, the diadem encouraged. They are chaos. I am order. But then, the sword of Gryffindor did something it had never done. It let out a pulse of pure, unadulterated grief. It shared the memory of Godric Gryffindor weeping for the loss of his friend Salazar. It shared the weight of the blood it had shed to protect the weak. Loyalty is the only metal that does not rust. The sword roared. The shock of the emotion broke the diadem's hold. Harry roared, not with words but with raw magical intent. He jumped from the desk, the sword raised high above his head. I don't want to rule. Harry screamed. I just want it to stop. He brought the blade down in a vertical arc. The diadem tried to flare, a shield of blue intellectual fire erupting to meet the steel. I am the truth. The diadem screamed. I am the end. The sword replied. The collision sent a shockwave through the room of hidden things. Mountains of junk collapsed. Hundreds of objects screamed in a final, terrifying unison as the feedback hit them. The diadem split in two. A fountain of black, ink-like blood sprayed from the silver, followed by a high-pitched, feminine shriek that sounded like 1,000 violins snapping at once. A ghostly image of a beautiful, distorted woman rose from the wreckage, her eyes leaking darkness, before dissolving into a cloud of foul-smelling smoke. The diadem lay on the floor, its silver dull, the great blue stone cracked and lifeless. Silence. Absolute. Terrifying silence. The sword in Harry's hand went quiet. The rubies dimmed. It had fed. Harry fell to his knees, gasping for air. The room felt lighter, the oppressive weight of the Horcrux gone. But the silence was almost worse than the noise. Harry, Ron asked, stepping cautiously through the debris. You okay, mate? Harry looked at his hands. They were covered in the black residue of the Horcrux. He looked at the sword. 3, Harry whispered. The diary, the locket, the diadem. There are more, and the more I kill, the more the world feels like it's breaking. We are not breaking, the stone floor under him whispered, a soft, grounding vibration. We are being cleansed. The infection is being cut out. Stand up, lion. The master of the snake is coming, and he is bringing the storm. Harry stood, using the sword as a crutch. He looked at the entrance to the room. He could feel it now, a massive, dark presence moving toward the school. It wasn't just Voldemort, it was an army of things that hated the light. He's coming, Harry said, his eyes turning toward the window. He knows I'm killing his soul. He's going to level the castle to stop me. Let him come. The walls of Hogwarts hummed, a deep, resonant sound that vibrated through every brick in the school. We have been waiting 1,000 years for a fight like this. Harry gripped the sword tighter. The hunt was over. The war was here. End of Chapter 8. Chapter 9. The Siren of the Deep Water. The air in the Great Hall didn't just feel cold, it felt thin, as if the castle were holding its breath before a plunge. Dumbledore was gone, chased into the night by a ministry decree that the stones of the school had already forgotten. To the castle, a headmaster was just a tenant. But Harry was the conversation. The water is calling, the heavy oak floorboards of the entrance hall murmured as Harry paced. Below the roots, below the dungeons. The Black Lake is heavy tonight. It's full of secrets that don't want to be kept. The giant squid is dreaming of the stars, and the merfolk are sharpening their spears of bone. Harry clutched the sword of Gryffindor. The blade was restless, its edge shimmering with a predatory silver light. The cup, it hummed. I smell the gold of the Huddlepuff. I smell the honey in the earth. But there is something else. A thing of scales. A thing of hunger. Harry, you can't just go down there, Hermione said, her voice echoing in the empty hall. The lake is a localized magical vacuum. Your ability, hearing the objects, it'll be amplified by the pressure. It'll be like a scream that never ends. I have to, Harry said, his eyes fixed on the massive front doors. The diadem showed me. Riddle didn't just hide his soul in things of pride, he hid them in the elements. The locket was cave and salt. The diadem was air and height. The cup is the deep. Harry didn't walk to the doors. He walked to the center of the hall and slammed the sword's point into the stone. Hogwarts, Harry commanded. The way down. The secret veins. Show me. The floor didn't just open, it dissolved. The stones liquefied into a dark, swirling vortex that smelled of wet earth and ancient moss. A spiral staircase made of jagged flint rose from the abyss. The drain, the stairs hissed. We lead to the mouth of the world. Watch your step, lightning boy. The darkness down there has teeth. Harry descended. Ron and Hermione followed, their wands casting long, flickering shadows against walls that were no longer masonry, but raw, dripping bedrock. As they went deeper, the sound changed. It wasn't the chatter of the castle anymore. It was a low, subsonic thrum, the heartbeat of the earth. Thrum, thrum, thrum. They reached a massive iron grate, rusted and slick with algae. Beyond it lay the subterranean edge of the Black Lake, the water blacker than ink and still as a mirror. I am the weight of the drowned, the water whispered, its voice a billion overlapping ripples. I hold the shipwrecks and the bones. I hold the things that were too heavy for the sun. Come in, Harry Potter. Let me fill your lungs with the silence of the deep. There, Harry pointed. In the center of the underwater cavern, resting on a pedestal of white coral, was a small, two-handled gold cup engraved with a badger. Helga Hufflepuff's cup. It should have radiated warmth and hard work. But it was emitting a toxic, golden haze that turned the surrounding water into a corrosive acid. I am the bounty that poisons. The cup roared, its voice vibrating through the very liquid. I am the feast of the dead. I am the gold that eats the hand that holds it. Suddenly, the water erupted. A massive, serpentine shape burst from the depths, a giant, prehistoric eel, its skin translucent, revealing a skeleton made of glowing, green cursed fire. It was a guardian, an object of flesh and dark magic fused into one. SNNNAAAAKKKKEE, the sword in Harry's hand screamed. Recognizing the kin of the basilisk. The eel lunged. Its jaws weren't teeth. They were jagged shards of obsidian that whispered of 1,000 severed limbs. Crunch, rend, snap, the jaws sang. Reducto, Ron shouted, but the spell hit the water and dissipated into a harmless sizzle. Standard spells won't work, Harry yelled over the roaring of the water. The lake is drinking the magic. You have to talk to the medium. Harry stepped into the water. He didn't swim, he commanded. Water, Harry roared, you are the blood of the world. You are the life giver. Why do you let this filth swim in you? Why do you carry the weight of a murderer? The lake shuddered. The ripples turned into jagged peaks. We are tired, the water groaned. We are choked by the green fire. The serpent burns our lungs. Help us, son of the earth. Then freeze, Harry commanded. He slammed his hand onto the surface. He didn't use a spell. He projected the absolute, 0-point silence of the void he had felt in the Elder Wand. The lake didn't just freeze, it crystallized in a heartbeat. The giant eel was caught mid-lunge, its body encased in a block of ice as hard as diamond. The green fire in its bones flickered and died, the cold snuffing out the curse. Chill, peace, stillness, the ice whispered, a million tiny needles of sound. Harry walked across the frozen surface toward the cup. The sword of Gryffindor was glowing with a white-hot intensity, melting the path before him. He reached the coral pedestal. The cup was shaking. You cannot destroy me. I am the soil. I am the harvest. Without me, the world starves. You aren't the harvest, Harry said, standing over it. You're the rod in the grain. He didn't swing the sword. He knelt and touched the cup with his bare hand. The gold burned, his skin blistering. But he didn't pull away. He poured his consciousness into the metal. He heard the voices of the house elves who had cleaned it, the kings who had toasted with it, and finally, the scream of the woman Voldemort had murdered to steal it. Hepzibah, the cup whispered, a dying woman's breath. Rest now, Harry said. He drove the sword through the center of the cup. The explosion wasn't physical, it was a blast of pure, golden grief. The ice shattered, the water surged back, a tidal wave of cleansing blue. The cup split, and a cloud of black, oily smoke, the shape of a screaming skeletal badger, erupted and was instantly dissolved by the lake. Harry was thrown back against the rock wall, the wind knocked out of him. As he sank into the now calm water, he felt the lake embrace him. It wasn't trying to drown him anymore. It was thanking him. Clean, we are clean, the water hummed, a gentle, rhythmic lullaby. Ron and Hermione hauled him out onto the flint steps. Harry was shivering, his hands scorched and his eyes weary. Harry rasped, holding up 4 fingers. The cup is gone. But as they climbed back toward the castle, a new sound began to echo from above. It wasn't a whisper. It was a scream, a mechanical, rhythmic screeching that Harry recognized instantly. The alarm bells of Hogwarts. Clang, clang, clang. The walls are breached. The gates are falling. The dark man is at the edge of the forest. Battle, battle, battle. Harry looked at his friends. The time for hunting was over. The castle was calling its defenders to the walls. The stones were ready to bleed. He's here, Harry said, his voice cold and hard as the ice he had just summoned. Tell the DA to wake the armor. Tell the statues to prepare for blood. The King of Craps is going to meet the Lord of Shadows. As he ran toward the Great Hall, the Sword of Gryffindor sang a war song that echoed through the very marrow of the earth. End of Chapter 9. Chapter 10. The Bone Song of the Ramparts. The horizon didn't just darken, it bruised. A sickly, necrotic purple bled across the sky as the forbidden forest exhaled a legion of nightmares. Giant spiders clicked their mandibles in a rhythmic war drum beat, and the giant's footsteps vibrated through the castle's foundations like the hammers of a dying god. Thump, thump, thump. Harry stood on the highest battlement of the astronomy tower, the wind whipping his cloak. The sword of Gryffindor was strapped to his back, but his hands were pressed flat against the ancient, cold stone of the parapet. They are here, little king, the tower whispered. Its voice a gravelly rumble of centuries-old pride. The soil is screaming. The trees are being uprooted. The dark man brings a fire that does not cook, it only consumes. Do we hold? Do we stand? We stand, Harry said, his voice a low vibration that seemed to carry across the entire grounds. He didn't need to look down to know the DA was ready. He could hear them, not their voices, but their gear. Neville's wand was humming a tune of regrowth and defiance. Ginny's robes were crackling with static electricity. Ron's boots were gripping the stone floor of He courtyard with the tenacity of a mountain climber. Ready, 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 The equipment of the defenders chanted. But across the bridge, the enemy's arsenal was louder. The Death Eaters carried wands that shrieked with the spirits of the tortured. Their masks, cold, silver visages, were laughing. I see the bone. I see the fear. The masks hissed. We are the faces of the end. Voldemort stood at the front, a pale specter of negation. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His presence was a psychic vacuum that sucked the sound out of the world. Even the air around him was begging for mercy. I am the silence. Voldemort's intent projected, a cold oil slick in Harry's mind. I am the stillness of the grave. Give me the boy, and I will let the stones remain. Resist, and I will turn this mountain into a memory of ash. The stones don't want your mercy, Harry whispered. He closed his eyes and expanded his consciousness. He didn't just hear the objects near him, he reached for the heart of the castle. He reached for the Pyretotem locomotor. Hogwarts, Harry roared, and his voice wasn't human anymore. It was the sound of a landslide, the sound of a forest fire, the sound of 1,000 years of life. Wake up! The castle didn't just react, it exploded into motion. Down in the corridors, the suits of armor didn't just step off their plinths, they roared. The metal plates ground against each other, creating a terrifying, metallic screech, clank, rattle, strike. For the founders, for the lions, the statues of the winged boars at the gates didn't just move, they took flight, their stone wings beating with a sound like thunderclaps. The gargoyles detached themselves from the eaves, their claws scraping against the masonry as they scrambled down the walls like predatory insects. Flesh to tear, eyes to pluck, the gargoyles shrieked. Shields up, Harry commanded. 100 students raised their wands. But they weren't just casting Protega. They were feeding the wall. Harry directed the flow, weaving the magical energy into the very molecular structure of the castle's skin. The stones of the outer wall began to glow with a deep, pulsing sapphire light. The mortar between the bricks turned to liquid silver, reinforcing the gaps. I am the Aegis, the front gate boomed, its iron bars glowing white-hot. No shadow enters, no lie passes, I am the jaw of the mountain. First wave of Death Eaters hit the bridge. They fired curses that would have leveled a village, but the spells didn't just hit the wall, they were eaten. The stones absorbed the kinetic energy, turning the dark fire into a low-level hum of power. Tastes like bile. A buttress near the Great Hall spat, vibrating as it neutralized a killing curse. Give me more. I've been hungry for a fight since the Great Fire of 1666. Harry watched as a giant swung a massive club, a whole oak tree stripped of its branches, at the North Tower. Oof! Watch the ribs. The tower groaned. Tower, lean in, Harry yelled. The stone structure actually shifted, a subtle, impossible tilt that caught the giant's momentum. As the giant overbalanced, the stone gargoyles leapt from the roof, burying their claws in the giant's neck. The air was a cacophony of war. The screaming of spells, the roar of stone, the clashing of steel. But through the noise, Harry heard a specific, high-pitched whistle. A snake, not just any snake. Nagini, the sword of Gryffindor whispered on his back. The final anchor, the living vessel. I smell the venom, I smell the soul scrap. Voldemort had unleashed his serpent. She was moving through the shadows of the forest. A ribbon of emerald death, headed for a secret breach in the dungeons that only the house's founder had known. I go to the damp, Nagini hissed, her thoughts a cold, wet slide of predatory instinct. I go to the dark. I will bite the heels of the defenders. I will drink the blood of the girl with the bushy hair. Ron, Hermione, the dungeons, Harry shouted, pointing toward the lake-level entrance. The snake is coming. Use the water. Use the pipes. Harry turned back to the main battle. The Death Eaters were through the first layer of defense. The DGE was a charnel house of shattered stone and broken masks. Voldemort was stepping onto the grounds, his feet barely touching the grass, which blackened and died where he trod. The grass is weeping. The soil wailed. He is a cancer. He is a void. Stop him, Harry. He is unmaking the world. Harry jumped from the tower. He didn't use a broom. He didn't use a spell. He willed the air to catch him. We've got you, brother. The wind whispered, swirling into a localized updraft that lowered him gently into the center of the courtyard. He landed in front of Voldemort. The two stood in a circle of absolute silence while the world burned around them. Voldemort looked at Harry, then at the castle. He saw the statues fighting. He saw the walls breathing. He saw the very earth rising up to protect the boy. You have taught the stones to sing, Potter, Voldemort said, his voice a dry rasp that made the nearby suits of armor shudder. But a song is just air. And air is easily stilled. Voldemort raised the Elder Wand. The wand didn't speak. It just hummed a low, terrifying note of finality. Death, the ground beneath Harry's feet mourned. The end is here. It's not a song, Tom, Harry said, drawing the sword of Gryffindor. The silver blade caught the light of 100 explosions, looking like a streak of fallen lightning. It's a revolution, and you're the only thing left in this world that doesn't belong. The sword and the wand met in a clash of red and green that turned the night into noon. The impact didn't just shake the castle, it shattered every window in a 3-mile radius. Break him, the sword roared. Extinguish, the wand replied. The siege of Hogwarts had reached its boiling point. The blood of the living was being spilled on the memory of the dead, and Harry Potter was the conductor of the final screaming symphony. End of Chapter 10. Chapter 11. The Serpent's Tongue in the Dark. The air in the dungeons was a thick, stagnant soup of sulfur and ancient damp. While the battle raged above, the bowels of Hogwarts were a different kind of war zone, a place of silence, shadow, and the slow, heavy drip of the lake leaking through the limestone. Harry sprinted rough the corridors of Slytherin territory, his boots splashing in the shallow puddles. He wasn't alone. The walls here were different from the rest of the castle. They were smooth, cold, and secretive. They didn't cheer for him. They watched him with a suspicious, emerald-tinted eye. The intruder comes, the green-lit lamps along the wall flickered. The lion in the pit. He smells of surface air and sun. We remember the master who spoke the tongue of the snake. This boy is a pretender. This boy is a thief. Shut up, Harry hissed, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling. I'm here to kill the parasite. If you want to survive the night, you'll stay out of my way. Ooh, the little king has a bite, a heavy silver wall sconce sneered. But the great snake is already here. She moves in the pipes. She moves in the marrow. She is the hunger that never sleeps. Harry felt the vibration before he heard it. A rhythmic, wet scraping sound coming from the massive iron pipes that ran along the ceiling. Nagini was close. She wasn't just a beast. She was a vessel for the Horcrux, and she radiated a psychic filth that made the very water in the puddles turn black and oily. Master's soul, I carry the shard. Nagini's thoughts were a cold, slithering pressure in Harry's skull. I smell the boy who listens. I will taste his warm blood. I will wrap his heart in my coils and squeeze until the voices stop. Harry, Ron and Hermione burst from a side passage, their faces streaked with soot and blood. Ron was clutching a heavy, jagged tooth from the basilisk skeleton, a souvenir fro. Their frantic trip to the Chamber of Secrets. We've got the venom, Harry. Ron panted, holding up the fang. But she's fast, too fast. We can't get close enough to strike. I'll ground her, Harry said, his eyes scanning the ceiling. The pipes above them were groaning. She's inside us, the iron wailed. The cold scale, the poison blood, she is stretching our seams. Help us, we are bursting. Pipes, Harry roared, extending his hands. Open, release the pressure. The iron didn't just leak, it exploded. The rivets popped like bullets, and a torrent of pressurized, freezing lake water erupted from the ceiling, slamming into the shadowy form moving within. Nagini was flushed out, her massive, 12-foot body hitting the stone floor with a heavy, wet thud. She hissed, a sound that shattered the glass of every nearby lamp, and reared up, her hood spreading wide. Kill, 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 the snake's mind screamed, a red-hot spike of animalistic rage. Now, Harry yelled. Hermione fired a binding curse. But Nagini moved with supernatural fluidity, her scales deflecting the spell as if she were made of living diamond. She lunged for Hermione, her jaws unhinging to reveal fangs dripping with a neurotoxic rot. Meat, the fangs whispered. Harry didn't use his wand. He grabbed a heavy iron grate from the floor, a massive piece of metal that had spent centuries draining the waste of the dungeons. I am heavy, I am cold, I am the gate of the filth. The grate roared as Harry lifted it with a strength born of pure adrenaline. Harry slammed the grate down onto the snake's midsection, pinning her to the stone floor. The iron groaned as Nagini thrashed, her powerful muscles threatening to snap the metal. Hold her, Harry commanded the floor. The stone slabs beneath Nagini began to shift, rising up like jagged teeth to trap her coils. The dungeon was answering the call. The floorboards, the pipes, the very air was converging on the serpent. I cannot breathe, Nagini hissed, her red eyes bulging. The stone is eating me. Master, help me. Voldemort's voice suddenly boomed through the dungeon, a psychic projection so powerful it cracked the walls. Potter, you dare touch my shore. You dare try to snap the final thread. Quote, the air in the room solidified into a dark, swirling vortex. A shadow of Voldemort, not the man, but a concentrated blast of his will, materialized over the trapped snake. Kill the boy, the shadow commanded. Nagini let out a final, agonizing shriek and her body began to glow with a sickly green light. She wasn't just a snake anymore, she was a bomb of dark energy. The Horcrux was self-destructing to take them all out. I am the end. The snake's soul roared. No, Harry said, his voice a calm, vibrating note of absolute authority. He stepped toward the glowing serpent. He didn't look at the shadow. He looked at the sword of Gryffindor on his back. The silver blade was screaming, its rubies pulsing with a hunger that matched the snake's. The venom, the sword sang. The final meal. Feed me the darkness, brother. Harry drew the sword. The silver light of the blade cut through the green gloom of the dungeon like a razor through silk. You aren't a god, Tom, Harry said. You're just a man who forgot that the world he stands on has a memory. Harry drove the sword through Nagini's skull. The explosion was silent. A shockwave of pure, white-hot grief rippled outward, knocking Ron and Hermione off their feet. The shadow of Voldemort let out a soundless scream of agony and dissolved into ash. Nagini's body didn't just die, it disintegrated into a cloud of black, oily smoke that smelled of old graves and wasted years. The Horcrux was gone. The final anchor was snapped. Silence returned to the dungeon. But it was a heavy silence, pregnant with the realization of what had just happened. Harry stood over the spot where the snake had been. The sword of Gryffindor was smoking, its edge now etched with fine, black veins, the memory of the final Horcrux. It is done, the sword whispered, its voice now tired, like a soldier after a long campaign. The snake is dead, the pieces are gone, only the man remains. Harry looked at his hands. They were shaking. He could feel it now. The tether between him and Voldemort was thinning, fraying until it was nothing but a single, vibrating thread of hate. Harry, Ron asked, picking himself up from the floor. Is that it? Is he vulnerable now? He's mortal, Harry said, his eyes turning toward the ceiling. And he knows it. He's going to bring everything down on us now. He has nothing left to lose. Above them, the castle gave a massive, agonizing groan. A section of the ceiling collapsed, revealing the burning sky of the battlefield. The siege was entering its final, most brutal phase. The heart is exposed. The stone floor whispered under Harry's feet. The King of Scraps must go to the center. The Great Hall is the stage. The final act is starting. Harry didn't run. He walked. Every step he took, the castle reinforced the floor beneath him. Every door he approached swung open with a joyful, defiant bang. Let's go, Harry said to Ron and Hermione. Let's go end this once and for all. As they climbed out of the dungeons, the sword of Gryffindor began to hum a low, steady note, the sound of a bell tolling for the end of an era. The world was loud, but for the first time, Harry Potter knew exactly what it was saying. End of Chapter 11. Chapter 12. The Requiem of the Elder Stone. The Great Hall was no longer a place of feasts, it was a cathedral of carnage. The enchanted ceiling, usually a mirror of the night sky, was a swirling vortex of ash and lightning, reflecting the psychic agony of the castle. The 4 long house tables had been upturned to form barricades, and they groaned with the weight of the wounded they supported. I was made for bread and laughter, the Gryffindor table sobbed, its wood stained with a copper-scented dampness. Now I hold the broken bones of children. I am heavy with the salt of their tears. I want to be a tree again. I want to be silent. Harry stepped over the threshold. The air inside was vibrating at a frequency so low it made his vision blur. Every stone in the hall was humming a death knell. At the far end, standing on the raised dais where the teachers once sat, was Voldemort. He looked diminished, but more dang. Ruse, like a star collapsing into a black hole. Without his Horcruxes, his skin looked like translucent parchment stretched over a skull of cold light. He held the Elder Wand, and the wand was screaming. I am the end. The Elder Wand vibrated, a soundless roar that only Harry could hear. I am the bone of the world. I have no master. I only have the hunger. You've come to watch it fall, Potter, Voldemort said, his voice a dry rustle of dead leaves. Around him, the air was distorted, as if reality were failing. Look at your sanctuary. It is a tomb. Harry looked. Bellatrix Lestrange was Ji-hing as she traded spells with Molly Weasley. The floorboards under Bellatrix were trying to trip her, but she was so fueled by madness that she was stomping the wood into splinters. She is breaking me. The floor shrieked. The mad woman bites the earth. The castle isn't a building, Tom, Harry said, his voice projecting through the hall like a physical force. It's a witness, and it's seen enough of you. Harry closed his eyes. He didn't reach for his wand. He didn't reach for the sword. He reached for the source. He connected his mind to the very foundation stones of Hogwarts, the ancient, granite heart buried miles below. Everyone out, Harry roared. The command didn't just come from his lungs, it came from the walls. The doors of the Great Hall slammed open, and a localized gravet. Why surge pushed the defenders toward the exits. Harry, no, Hermione screamed, but the wind of the hall, the very breath of the castle, carried her and Ron out into the courtyard. Go, little ones, the air whispered. The kings must speak in the dark. Now it was just Harry and Voldemort. And the dead, and the screaming objects. Voldemort hissed, a sound of pure negation, and slashed the Elder Wand. A jet of green fire, not a curse, but a literal flame of soul-eating energy, erupted toward Harry. Harry didn't move. He pointed at the floor. Rise, Harry commanded. The stone floor of the Great Hall buckled. A massive slab of granite, 10 feet thick, tore itself from the ground and intercepted the fire. The stone didn't melt, it absorbed. I remember the forge, the granite slab roared in Harry's mind. I remember the mountain's weight. This green fire is a tickle. You think you can command the world against me? Voldemort laughed, a high, cold sound. I am the master of death. I hold the wand of the Peverells. Voldemort slammed the Elder Wand against the air. The air itself shattered like glass. Shards of reality, jagged, transparent blades of pure force, flew toward Harry. Harry drew the sword of Gryffindor. He didn't swing it at the shards. He plunged the blade into the ground at his feet. Hogwarts, shield. The architecture responded. The massive stone pillars along the walls detached themselves from the ceiling and leaned inward, forming a ribbed vault over Harry. The shards of reality slammed into the pillars, carving deep gouges, but the stone held. We are the shoulders of the giants, the pillars groaned. We hold the sky, we will not fall. Through the gaps in the pillars, Harry saw Voldemort's face. For the first time, there was fear in the red eyes. Voldemort wasn't just fighting a boy. He was fighting a localized deity of the material world. The wand is lying to you, Tom, Harry said, stepping out from the stone ribs. The sword of Gryffindor was glowing white an incandescent white light that made the shadows in the hall disappear. It's not yours. It never was. It doesn't belong to the strong. It belongs to the one who is willing to let it go. Truth. The Elder Wand pulsed, a sudden, jagged spike of resonance that made Voldemort's hand twitch. Silence. Voldemort shrieked at the wand. He turned his gaze to the ceiling. If I cannot have this throne, no one shall. He pointed the wand upward and unleashed a blast of raw, entropic energy. The enchanted ceiling, the sky of the castle, began to collapse. Huge chunks of stone, heavy with 1,000 years of magic, began to rain down like meteors. We are falling. We are dying. The ceiling stones wailed as they plummeted. Harry didn't look up. He looked at the Elder Wand. He heard its true frequency, not the hunger, but the fatigue. It had been used to kill for centuries, and it was tired. It wanted to break. It wanted to be a branch in the woods again. Wand, Harry yelled, his voice a frequency of pure empathy. You are tired. You are the bone of a man who died for love. Stop the slaughter. The Elder Wand vibrated so hard Voldemort's arm began to smoke. I want to sleep. The wand groaned. A sound like a glacier cracking. Voldemort tried to force the spell, but the wand resisted. The green energy backfired, surging through Voldemort's body. He let out a primal scream as his own magic began to dissolve his physical form. No, Voldemort roared, trying to grab the air. At that moment, the largest piece of the ceiling, the central keystone marked with the Hogwarts crest, fell directly toward them. Harry didn't move to save himself. He reached out and caught the stone spirit. Hold, Harry thought. The keystone froze in midair, inches above his head. It hung there, defying gravity. A 5-ton weight held up by nothing but Harry's will. But Voldemort wasn't so lucky. The entropy had stripped him of his defenses. The shards of his own shattered wand will tore into him. You hear them? Voldemort gasped, falling to his knees. The Elder Wand flew from his hand, spinning through the air. Harry caught it. The moment the Elder Wand touched Harry's hand, the hall went silent. The stones stopped screaming. The fires died down. The ceiling stones that were falling simply drifted to the ground like feathers. The Elder Wand didn't roar. It sighed. Thank you, Brother, it whispered. Its voice a soft, wooden rustle. The long night is over. Voldemort looked up at Harry. His face was a mask of confusion and hate. And then, without a word, he began to flake away. He didn't die like a man. He disintegrated like a piece of burnt parchment in a high wind. His ashes were caught by the draft of the hall and carried away through the shattered windows. The Lord of Shadows was gone. Harry stood in the center of the ruined hall. He held the sword of Gryffindor in one hand and the Elder Wand in the other. He was the master of the things. But as the silence deepened, he heard the cost. The castle was weeping. Every cracked stone, every burnt tapestry, every broken window was letting out a low, mournful hum of pain. We are hurt, we are cold, the hall whispered. Harry looked at the Elder Wand. He knew what it could do. He could use it to rebuild everything in a heartbeat. He could make the stones sing again. He could be the eternal king of the castle. No, Harry whispered. He looked at the wand. Do it, the wand encouraged. Break the cycle. Harry placed the Elder Wand on the floor. He didn't use it. He took the sword of Gryffindor and, with a final, heavy strike, he shattered the Elder Wand into 3 pieces. The sound was like a single, perfect note on a harp. Freedom, the wand's splinters whispered before turning into ordinary wood. Harry sat down on the rubble. He was exhausted. His head was quiet for the first time in a year. The objects were still talking, but they were no longer screaming. They were just there. Rest, Harry Potter. The floor under him whispered. The war is over. The silence is yours. He closed his eyes, and for the first time in his life, he didn't listen to the world. He just listened to his own heart, beating steady and true in the quiet dark. End of Chapter 12. Chapter 13. The Pallor of the Reconstruction. The morning after the fall of the Dark Lord didn't bring a golden sunrise. It brought a pale, sickly gray dawn that crawled over the jagged remains of the battlements like a shroud. The great hall was a hollowed-out ribcage, the air tasting of pulverized limestone and spent lightning. Harry sat on a pile of rubble that used to be a statue of a gargoyle. His hands were stained with a mixture of soot, blood, and the oily residue of the Elder Wand's passing. The sword of Gryffindor lay across his lap, its rubies dim, its edge notched. I am heavy, the sword groaned, the metal vibrating with a dull, leaden ache. I have drunk too much poison. I have cut too many threads. I want to sleep in the dark. I want to forget the taste of the snake. Soon, Harry whispered, his voice a ghost of itself. Around him, the survivors moved like sleepwalkers. They were trying to clear the debris. But the objects weren't cooperating. The stones were traumatized. The tapestries were mourning their lost threads. Don't touch me. A scorched rug shrieked as a student tried to move it. I hold the blood of a brave boy. Let it sink in. Let it become part of the floor. Harry looked at the castle. For the first time, he saw the true cost of his gift. He didn't just see broken walls, he felt the psychological collapse of the architecture. Hogwarts was suffering from a collective nervous breakdown. The stairs were refusing to move, staying frozen in jagged, illogical angles. The portraits were all turned toward the wall, weeping in their painted frames. We saw the end, a portrait of a forgotten headmaster whispered to the canvas. We saw the green light wash over the world. We are no longer art. We are archives of the slaughter. Harry, Kingsley Shacklebolt approached, his presence a stabilizing, rhythmic thrum, like a heavy bronze bell. He looked at the boy who had just Disma. NT led a god and seen the bones of the world. The ministry is calling, Harry, Kingsley said, his voice resonant. They want a statement. They want to know what happened to the wand. They want to know how the castle fought. The ministry can wait, Harry said, not looking up. The castle is bleeding, Kingsley. It's not just stone. It's a memory. And right now, it's remembering every death. Truth. The floor beneath them vibrated. A low, mournful chord. Harry stood up. He felt a different frequency now, a sharp, mechanical ticking coming from the direction of the headmaster's office. It wasn't one of the old instruments. It was something new, something cold. He walked through the ruins, his presence acting as a tuning fork. As he passed, the stones stopped weeping and began to hum in a low, tentative harmony. The king walks. The corridors whispered. The one who hears the cracks. The one who stitched the sky. He reached the spiral staircase to the office. The gargoyle was gone, ducked to a pile of pebbles that sang a high-pitched, crystalline dirge. Harry climbed the stairs. Inside the office, the air was freezing. Sitting on the desk that had seen Dumbledore's secrets and Dippett's failures, was a small silver box. It wasn't magical in the way Hogwarts was. It was technological. It was the new magic of the Ministry's Department of Mysteries. I am the auditor, the box ticked. Its voice a series of precise, metallic clicks. I measure the resonance. I record the deviation. I am the silence of the state. Open me, Potter. Let me categorize your soul. Harry stared at it. Behind the box stood a man in a sharp, gray suit. Not a wizard's robe, a suit that felt like it was made of woven needles. Mr. Potter, the man said. His voice was a flat, synthesized tone. I am Director Rook of the Erasure Committee. We are here to stabilize the site. He lies, Harry's wand hissed from his pocket. He smells of vacuum and cold ink. He wants to mute the world. He wants to take the voices away. Stabilize? Harry asked, his eyes beginning to glow with a flickering, unstable green light. You mean silence. Hogwarts has become loud, Rook said, gesturing to the vibrating walls. The objects are talking back to our agents. The bricks are refusing to be repaired. You have awakened a level of sentience in the material world that the Ministry deems a level 4 ontological threat. We cannot have a world where the chairs have opinions on the law. We hate the law, a nearby chair barked, its legs slamming against the floor. The world is alive, Harry said, stepping toward Rook. The room began to darken, the shadows stretching toward the director like hungry fingers. It's always been alive. You were just too deaf to hear it. We have the technology to fix that, Rook said. He touched the silver box. A high-pitched, agonizing whine erupted from the device. It was a frequency of pure negation. It wasn't a sound, it was the absence of sound. No, agony. The instruments in the room screamed. The void, it's eating our memories. The portraits wailed as their colors began to fade into a dull, flat gray. Harry fell to his knees, clutching his head. The noise, the beautiful, chaotic, tragic symphony of the world, was being erased. It felt like his own mind was being scrubbed with sandpaper. Harry, help us. The office desk cried out, its wood s. Splintering as the auditor box drained its history. I remember the first spells. I remember the light. Don't let them turn me into dust. Harry roared. He didn't use a spell. He didn't use a wand. He reached into the very center of his being, to the place where the voices of the objects lived. You will not be quiet. Harry's magic exploded outward, not as a blast of light, but as a surge of pure, raw identity. He poured every story he had heard into the room. He told the box about the locket's grief, the diadem's pride, the wand's fatigue, and the castle's love. The frequency of the Audi. Tor box met the frequency of Harry's soul. The air between them turned into a shimmering wall of white noise. I cannot categorize that infinite, the box sputtered, its ticking becoming frantic and erratic. Too much data, too much emotion, the wood is crying, the stone is singing. I am breaking. The silver box shattered. The silence vanished, replaced by a roar F returned sound so powerful it blew the windows out of the office. Rook was thrown back against the wall, his gray suit shredded by the sheer force of the castle's collective voice. We are here, the castle screamed in a glorious, terrifying unison. We are the bones of the earth. We are the witnesses. We will not be erased. Harry stood over Rook, the sword of Gryffindor glowing with a light that looked like a newborn sun. Go back to the Ministry, Harry said, his voice vibrating through Rook's very skeleton. Tell them the world is awake now. And if they try to mute us again, I'll tell the walls of London to start talking. I'll tell the cobblestones of Whitehall to remember every drop of blood they've ever stepped on. Rook scrambled to his feet, his face a mask of pure, existential terror. He fled the room, leaving behind the shattered remains of his stability. Harry turned to the office. The colors had returned to the portraits. The instruments were humming softly. The desk felt solid again, its grain warm and thankful. Thank you, Lion, the desk whispered. We are still hurt, we are still broken, but we are real. Harry walked to the window and looked out over the ruins. The students were looking up, feeling the change in the air. The repair work was beginning again, but this time, the people and the stones were working together. A student would whisper to a brick, the brick would slide into place with a satisfied click. The war for the soul of the world was over. But the struggle to live in a world that never stopped talking had just begun. What now, brother? His wand asked, its tip sparking with a gentle, hopeful light. Now, Harry said, looking at the scarred horizon. We learn to build a world where the silence is a choice, not a cage. End of Chapter 13. Chapter 14. The Silence of the Weaving Fates. The world outside Hogwarts was a jagged landscape of recovering trauma. The Ministry of Magic was no longer a golden hall of bureaucratic arrogance, it was a wounded beast. Its tiles rattling with the echoes of the coos and the screams of the Muggle-borns who had been processed in its depths. Harry stood in the atrium, and the floor beneath him was a weeping wound. Cold heels, heavy hearts, the blood of the innocent washed away with lemon-scented soap, the dark tiles of the atrium sobbed. We remember the chains, we remember the fall of the fountain. We are the stage where the liars dance, and we are tired of the music. Harry adjusted the sword of Gryffindor on his back. He wasn't here for a trial or a ceremony. He was here because the objects of the world had told him about the final loom, the secret project of the unspeakables hidden in the deepest cellar of the Department of Mysteries. They are trying to weave a new reality, his holly wand whispered. Its core pulsing with a frantic, rhythmic heat. They want to rewrite the resonance. They want to make the world predictable again. They want to kill the spark that makes us speak. He moved toward the elevators. The golden grills didn't wait for him to press a button. They slid open with a desperate, metallic groan. Going down, Savior, the elevator car rattled. WN to the place where the silence is manufactured. Watch out for the cables, they're being fed the memories of the dead to keep them from snapping. As the lift plummeted, the air grew thick with the scent of ozone and ancient ink. Harry stepped out into the Department of Mysteries. The circular room with the many doors was spinning, its hinges screaming in 1,000 different languages. Which way, little king? The doors hissed in unison. The room of brains, the room of time, the room where the wind is made of old prayers. The loom, Harry commanded. A door at the far end didn't just open, it bled light. Inside was a chamber of infinite blackness, save for a massive, glowing structure in the center. It looked like a loom made of starlight and silver wire, millions of strands stretching out into the void. Each strand was a life, a history, a frequency. And sitting at the base of the loom was a woman Harry hadn't seen in years. Petunia Dursley. But she wasn't the bitter woman from Privet Drive. She was hollowed out, her eyes glowing with a sterile, white light. She was holding a pair of golden shears. The sister of the flower, the silver wires of the loom sang, a high-pitched, terrifying melody. She is the anchor of the mundane. She is the one who hates the magic because it took the sister she couldn't understand. She is the perfect weaver of the silent world. Aunt Petunia, Harry asked, his voice echoing in the void. The woman turned. Her movements were jerky, like a marionette. The boy, she said, her voice a synthesized layer of 1,000 ministry voices. The boy who makes the world loud. You shouldn't be here, Harry. You're a knot in the tapestry. You're the reason the pattern is fraying. She isn't real, the sword of Gryffindor roared in his mind. She is a projection of the ministry's fear. A ghost of your trauma used as a mask. Strike the weaver, cut the threads. What are you doing here? Harry stepped closer. The air around the loom was vibrating with a sound like a billion bees. I am cleaning, Petunia said, and for a second, a flash of the real woman, the one who scrubbed the kitchen floor until her knuckles bled, flickered in her eyes. I am making the world quiet. No more owls, no more screaming letters, no more freakishness, just the hum of the vacuum, the ticking of a normal clock. I'm cutting the magic out of the world, Harry. For your own good. She raised the shears. She moved toward a strand of vibrant, pulsing green light, Harry's own thread. If she snips, the world goes dark. His wand shrieked. The frequency will be flatlined. Every object will become just a thing again. We will die in the silence. Harry drew the sword. Get away from the loom. You love the noise, don't you? Petunia mocked, her voice becoming a distorted growl. You love hearing the walls cry. You love being the center of the storm. But the world is tired, Harry. The people are tired of being small in a world of giants. I'm giving them back their peace. She snapped the shears. A shockwave of pure, non-existence ripped through the room. Harry felt the voices in his head dim. The floor beneath him stopped sobbing. It became just cold, hard stone. The sword in his hand lost its glow, becoming a heavy, dumb piece of iron. Harry, help! The sword's voice was a fading ember. Harry fell to his knees. The silence was physical. It was a vacuum that threatened to collapse his lungs. He looked at the loom. The strands were turning gray, the vibrant colors of magic being drained into the golden shears. He looked at Petunia, at the thing that wore his aunt's face. It wasn't just the ministry. It was the collective will of every person who was afraid of the dark, every person who wanted a world they could control. The world isn't yours, too. Mute. Harry gasped. He didn't have the voices anymore. He was alone in his own head for the first time since the graveyard. And in the silence, he found something deeper than the frequency of objects. He found the frequency of his own soul. He stood up, his muscles screaming. He didn't use the sword. He didn't use the wand. He reached out and grabbed the silver wires of the loom with his bare hands. The light of a billion lives surged through him. He saw the birth of stars, the first spell ever cast, the first time a child laughed at a trick. He saw the pain, the blood, the beauty, and the chaos. I accept the noise, Harry roared. He channeled his entire existence into the loom. He didn't try to fix the pattern, he blew it apart. He forced every object he had ever spoken to, every memory he had ever heard, into the silver wires. The loom didn't just break, it detonated into a supernova of sound and color. I remember. The walls of the ministry screamed. I am alive. The golden shears wailed as they melted in Petunia's hands. The projection of Petunia Dursley shrieked and dissolved into a cloud of gray ash. The Department of Mysteries shook to its foundations. Above, in the atrium, the floorboards began to dance. In the streets of London, the cobblestones began to sing. In the houses of the Muggles, the teacups began to tell stories of the mountains they came from. Harry stood in the center of the wreckage. The loom was gone, replaced by a swirling, chaotic nebula of raw magic that sat in the center of the room like a new sun. The voices came back, not as whispers, but as a triumphant, deafening chorus. We are. Harry's wand sparked with a violet flame. The sword of Gryffindor hummed a note of pure, crystalline joy. He walked out of the room, the shadows bowing as he passed. He took the elevator back to the atrium. When the doors opened, the world was different. It wasn't just magic, it was vivid. The air tasted of every storm that had ever brewed. The statues were stepping off their pedestals to shake hands with the wizards. Kingsley Shacklebolt was standing there, his face pale, looking at a fountain that was currently composing an opera. What did you do, Harry? Kingsley whispered. I broke the mute button, Harry said, his eyes glowing with a light that would never go out. The world is going to be loud from now on, Kingsley. We're going to have to learn how to listen. He walked out into the streets of London. The city was a riot of sound. The buildings were talking to the clouds. The Thames was gossiping with the bridges. And Harry Potter, the boy who listened, walked through the middle of it all, the conductor of a world that would never be silent again. But as he reached the edge of the city, he felt a pull. A single, low frequency coming from across the ocean. A voice he hadn't heard. A voice that sounded like old wood and older hunger. Come to the woods, little king, the voice whispered from the heart of the Black Forest. The first tree is waiting. The war for the soul was just the beginning. The war for the source is about to start. Harry looked toward the east. The final battle wasn't at Hogwarts. It was at the beginning of everything. End of Chapter 14. Chapter 15. The chorus of the first root. The Black Forest of Germany didn't just grow, it brooded. The trees here weren't mere timber. They were the pillars of the world's basement, thick with a moss that tasted like the dawn of time. Harry moved through the shifting fog, his boots treading on soil that felt like the skin of a sleeping colossus. He is here, the one with the lightning in his marrow, the ferns whispered, their fronds curling in a rhythmic shiver. The boy who broke the loom. The boy who let the world scream. Step carefully, son of iron. The first tree does not like to be woken. Harry was alone. Ron and Hermione were back at Hogwarts, helping the castle heal, but this journey, the final resonance, belonged to him. The sword of Gryffindor was no longer on his back, it had merged with his own intent, a weightless silver fire that sat behind his ribs. He reached the clearing. In the center stood the Yggdrasil shard, the first tree. Its bark was a mosaic of every material on earth. Veins of gold, plates of obsidian, and heartwood that pulsed with a deep, bioluminescent violet. It was the source of all object souls, the great ancestor of every wand, every stone, and every blade. And standing before it was the shadow that should have been gone. It wasn't Voldemort, it was a remnant, a psychic echo of the first Dark Lord. A creature of pure, unfiltered entropy that had been waiting for the world to become loud enough to return. It was a Void Walker, a being of the silence. The boy who listens, the Void Walker spoke, and the sound was a black hole, pulling the color out of the nearby leaves. You have done my work for me. You woke the world, and now that it is awake, it can finally feel the true depth of its pain. I am the mercy of the empty. I will burn the first tree and return the universe to the great quiet. The creature raised a hand of liquid shadow toward the first tree. The bark began to shrivel. A scream erupted from the forest, not from the birds or the beasts, but from the everything. Harry, help us! The wand in his pocket shrieked, its wood cracking under the pressure of the void. The source is bleeding. If the tree dies, the soul of the world dies. We will be hollow. We will be ash. Harry stepped forward. He felt the weight of every object he had ever touched. He felt the locket's grief, the sword's pride, the castle's love, and the loom's chaos. He wasn't just Harry Potter anymore. He was the avatar of the material. You want silence? Harry's voice didn't just echo, it shattered the air. I've heard the silence. It's a lie. The world isn't a pattern to be woven or a noise to be muted. It's a story that never ends. He reached out and grabbed the trunk of the first tree. The connection was a supernova. Harry's mind was flooded with the history of the planet, the cooling of the crust, the forging of the first hammer, the carving of the first flute. He felt every brick in every city, every nail in every ship, every ring on every finger. Lend me your voices, Harry roared to the world. Across the globe, the response was instantaneous. In London, the clock tower of Big Ben let out a thunderous chime of defiance. In Gringotts, the piles of gold roared like 1,000 lions. At Hogwarts, the great hall hummed a note of absolute power. We are. The world screamed back. Harry channeled the collective frequency of the entire planet through his own body. He became a conduit of pure, unadulterated existence. The green fire in his eyes turned into a blinding, prismatic white, the color of all sounds played at once. He slammed his hand against the Void Walker. The collision was the birth of a star. The entropy of the creature met the infinite history of the world. For a second, there was a struggle, the void trying to swallow the sound trying to shatter the void. Listen, Harry commanded. He forced the Void Walker to hear it all. He forced the creature to feel the texture of silk, the weight of stone, the sharpness of steel, and the warmth of a hearth. He drowned the silence in a flood of sensory reality. No, too much. The weight, the noise, the creature shrieked, its shadow form fracturing into a million jagged shards of light. The Void Walker dissipated, not into ash, but into meaning. Its darkness was absorbed by the first tree, turning into new leaves of deep, shimmering emerald. The forest went still, but it was a vibrant, living stillness. Harry collapsed at the base of the tree, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He was empty. The voices had receded, moving back into their respective objects, leaving him with a soft, gentle hum, the background radiation of a healthy world. The first tree pulsed once, a warm, golden light that washed over Harry, healing his scars and cooling his fevered mind. Well done, brother of the wood, the tree whispered, its voice like the rustle of 1,000 autumns. The world is awake. The silence is gone. You are no longer the listener. You are the witness. Harry sat up and looked at his hands. They were steady. He pulled his holly wand from his pocket. It felt warm, content, and quiet. It didn't need to scream anymore, it just was. He stood up and began the long walk back toward the edge of the forest. As he emerged into the sunlight, he saw them waiting for him. Ron, Hermione, Ginny, Neville, his family. Behind them, the castle of Hogwarts stood tall against the sky, its stones glowing with a renewed, ancient life. They didn't say anything. They didn't have to. Harry looked at the world, at the blades of grass, the stones on the path, the fabric of his friends' robes. He could hear their stories, their memories, and their hopes. It was a lot. It was messy. It was loud. And it was beautiful. Harry Potter smiled, tucked his wand into his pocket, and walked home through a world that would never stop talking to him. The legend of the boy who listened was over. The era of the world that spoke had begun. End of chapter 15. The legend of the boy who listened was over. The era of the world that spoke had begun. Harry reached the edge of the clearing, ere the boundary between the ancient woods and the modern world blurred. He paused, looking back one last time at the towering canopy of the Black Forest. The wind stirred the leaves, and for the first time, they didn't whisper warnings or secrets. They simply hummed a steady, peaceful chord of belonging. He joined his friends on the ridge overlooking the valley. Ron clapped a hand on his shoulder, and the touch felt grounded, the wool of Ron's sweater singing of home and hearth. Hermione met his eyes, her smile reflecting a quiet understanding that the noise in his head had finally found its harmony. Is it over, Harry? Ginny asked softly. Harry looked at the horizon, where the sun was beginning to climb, illuminating a world where every stone, every tree, and every heart now beat in a shared, vibrant symphony. "No," Harry said, his voice steady and clear. "It's finally starting." Together, they turned away from the shadows of the past and walked into the light of a living world, leaving the silence behind forever. The end.